Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our fall semester. I am coming to you today from Congregation Beth Israel in New Haven, Connecticut, one of the ancient synagogues here. It's magnificent, it's beautiful. If you've ever visited New Haven, Connecticut, you should stop by Congregation Beth Israel and take a look at one of the most beautiful sanctuaries that's been built over 100 years ago. It's good to have all of you back for our fall semester. I hope the sound is coming across okay. If it is, if you could, let's see, who do I see? Give me a thumbs up to let me know that the sound is good. I don't see anybody. But okay, I would imagine the sound is coming across, otherwise someone will, there we go. I see someone with a thumbs up. We appreciate that. Good to be back. I hope you guys had a wonderful summer and an inspiring holiday season. I want to thank the sponsors for this week's class. It's sponsored by Libby in honor of Gil Epstein's 92nd birthday. Happy birthday, Gil. You should have a year filled with mazel and good health, and nachas and happiness. It's also sponsored by Eliza George. Thank you so much, Eliza. And it's sponsored by Harold and Frank in appreciation of all the Zoom classes that we are offering with the Conejo Jewish Academy. If anyone's interested in sponsoring any of the upcoming weeks, you go to chabadconejo.com/sponsor and you're able to select the week you would like. Now, 19 months ago, the world as we knew it changed. COVID-19 brought a drastic change to our daily lives, and all of us needed to adapt to a new reality. And at the Academy, we quickly moved into what we now call the Zoom era. 20 months ago, the word Zoom just meant the expression of zooming off in a car, but suddenly Zoom took on a whole new meaning. And using Zoom and Facebook and YouTube, we continued all of our educational activities. Now, aside for it allowing all of our regular students to participate, it also opened up a worldwide audience to our classes and to our lectures. And Baruch Hashem, thank God, there have been now over 50,000 views of our recorded classes since the pandemic began. So there clearly is something to be said for the continuation of the online academy. Having said that, I miss being in a classroom and having that interaction, that personal interaction, that eye-to-eye contact, the energy, the direct feedback. But I understand that not everyone is ready for that. Either you live quite a distance away, or you're still not comfortable with an indoor group setting. So I'd like to suggest and offer a hybrid option, and with no pressure here at all. If you would like to join me in person next week, we'll keep the Zoom going. But if you'd like to join together while we're doing the Zoom, drop me an email. You don't have to register anywhere. Just drop me an email at rabbi@chabadconejo.com. So I'll gauge what the interest is and just say, if you do offer it in person, I would be interested in attending. It doesn't have to be a long email, very short email. And I'll know what the sense is out there, how many people to set up for. Our kitchen will know how much to prepare lunch for. This is not going to change our online availability. The look may change slightly in our Zoom because it will be more of a classroom setting, but let's see if we can make it work. Before I begin today's class, some commercials for you. First of all, I'm starting a new class next Wednesday evening at 7:30. It's called Biblical Reflections. Now, we've done Biblical Reflections before, but this time I'm going to be focusing on the story of Joseph and his family. A family divided, a family united. So I know the story of Joseph has made it to Broadway. It's made it to various different films. We're going to try to take a look at what's the message of the story of Joseph that the Torah is trying to give us. It starts next Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. If you're interested in joining, just go to jewishacademy.com, sign up over there. We'll send you the link for that. And then we have a film on October 25th. It's a premiere film. We're going to be showing it at the Westlake Village Cinema, October 25th, Monday evening at 7:30. The film is called Upheaval, and it's a documentary about the life of one of the great leaders of Eretz Yisrael, one of the great leaders of Israel, Prime Minister Menachem Begin. And some of you may be aware, some of you not aware of Menachem Begin's career before he became prime minister, to know the heroics of this man, this great leader of Israel. This wonderful documentary has been made, and we're going to be premiering it in Westlake Village on Monday, October 25th. And if you're open to going to an indoor event, please make your reservations. Again, go on jewishacademy.com, make your reservations there for this great documentary film. This semester, we're going to be studying from the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to continue the portion of Akev. We are in the middle of the 11th chapter, and I'm sure you're familiar with the prayer called the Shema. The Shema is actually made up of 3 different paragraphs from the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to be studying this semester the second paragraph. If you missed the first paragraph, which we studied a few years ago, have no fear, because I'm going to give you a summary and a refresher on the first paragraph, which has some similar things and some additional things. The second paragraph as it relates to the first paragraph. The second paragraph comes from the portion of Akev. The first paragraph was when we studied the portion of Chabad. But first, some background here. The Torah is made up of 5 books. It's called the 5 books of Moses. The 5th book of the Torah is called Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is a powerful address by Moses, given literally days before his passing. It's a mission statement to the Jewish people. It's Moses' final plea for them to keep the torch of Judaism aflame and see to it that it gets passed along, and all of its teachings, its laws, its understandings, that it gets passed on from one generation to the next. In this book, Moses will review some of the laws we already covered. He'll introduce some that we have not yet discussed. He'll remind them of the particular challenges and the rebellions experienced during the past 40 years that they wandered in the wilderness. He'll talk about the lows and he'll talk about the highs, the great moments and the very difficult challenges that they've experienced. You see, Moses understood that once they were to cross over the Jordan, life was going to be very different. The people would no longer see God's constant presence. They would no longer see the daily miracles. They'll no longer see manna falling from heaven every morning. They won't see water coming forth from a rock. They won't see the clouds of glory. All of the daily miracles that they witnessed during these 40 years, they won't see. They would have to plow, they would have to plant, they would have to harvest, they would have to establish courts and governments, and there'll be politicians, and they're going to have to forge social relationships and means to provide for and protect the needy and the helpless. All of this now is going to be their problem. No longer is it God will feed, no, you, society, will have to feed yourselves, your family, and those that are hungry. You're going to have to care for them. And therefore, there's going to need to be a social relationship, a body of laws that govern social relationship and business ethics and on and on and on. But what Moses understood that they would need would be strong faith and self-discipline to avoid the temptations of what they're going to see from their neighbors, the pagan neighbors that they were going to live next to, the ways of life that were left over by the Canaanite population. They would need to avoid false prophets, idol worship. They would need to be strong. They would need to be resolute. They would need to be determined. So imagine an address that needs to inspire, not for a day, not even for a week, not for a month, not for a year, not for a decade, not even for a century, not for a millennia. Imagine a speech that needs to inspire for an eternity. The book of Deuteronomy. It's not merely a review. It's not a summary of the previous 4 books. A review Moses did on a regular basis. This he's doing before his passing. This is different. This is his last will and testament. Not just to this generation standing on the shores of the Jordan River, about to enter the land of Israel for the first time, but to each and every generation to come thereafter. Moses is speaking to us as well. And it was after he gave this address that God instructs him to record it word for word, and for his address to be included in the Torah, making up the fifth of the 5 books of Moses, as part of God's Torah, as part of the eternal teaching to the Jewish people and to the world. So if we want to understand the concept of the term chosen people, if we want to understand what does it mean, what is its mission statement, the book of Deuteronomy spells it out. So I want to begin today in this overview of this idea of the chosen people with this question. The question is, why are we here? It's a simple question. Why are we here? I don't just mean in this immediate physical sense of this 1 hour. In the greater existential sense, as human beings, and more so as Jews, why are we here in this life, in this world? So let's go back to Abraham. Abraham, the first Jew, and the first communication that God has with Abraham. We have it in the portion of the week that we're studying right now that we'll read this Shabbat, Lech Lecha. The first blessing given to Abraham, God says, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. And here are the key words. V'yehei bracha, and you shall be a blessing. Not you should be blessed. That God said to him. But he's saying something different in these words. V'yehei bracha means you should be a blessing. You see, it's good to be blessed, but it's even better to be a blessing. To be a blessing means you're a blessing to others. To be blessed is to receive. To be a blessing is to imitate the Almighty and be a source of blessings to the world. And that's what defines us. It's our history, it's our identity, it's our destiny. It's in our very DNA to be a blessing. My friends, 3,333 years ago, our ancestors, fresh out of slavery in Egypt, were camped around a mountain in the Sinai desert, waiting for the most awesome event in the history of mankind. And at that point, God tells Moses to tell the Jewish people, Eila hadvarim, these words, Eila hadvarim, these words. And what are the words that God says? The atem tiyu li mamleches kohanim v'go kadosh. You shall be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And the commentator, the classic commentator of Torah and Talmud, his name was Rashi. He keys in on these words, Eila hadvarim, these words. And his comments are, lo pachot v'lo yoser. That when God says, these words, Moses, he's saying to Moses, no more and no less. Just those words. Now, what does that mean? Just those words, not more, not less. Obviously, if God is delivering a specific message and telling Moses, deliver this message to the people, Moses is not going to add to it. He's not going to subtract from it. He was told by God, deliver these words. So what does this mean that Rashi is telling us, no more, no less? So just picture the situation. The most awesome, impactful, transformative moment in our entire history. Everything, the purpose of creation, the fate and future of the world is all riding on it. Could you imagine being Moses at this moment? He's the chief rabbi of the world, right? He's got Mount Sinai on the background. You imagine the speech he would want to give at that particular time. The grand overview of the Torah, perhaps, this presentation of the values of the mitzvot. He could give the sermon of all sermons. And God says, no, this speech, Moses, it's going to be short. You'll have plenty of time to give your long sermons. This speech is going to be short. Just these words. Just these words. 7 words. You shall be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Why just those words? So let me tell you a story. Years ago, there was a family in Jerusalem who had a child with special needs. The child was severely challenged. And for years, the family managed to keep the child at home, but at some point it became too difficult to juggle the child's needs with that of the rest of the families. And they felt that it might be time to place him in a Jewish institution for children with special needs. They investigated. There were some very fine homes that cared for these children, fine organizations that put them up, and they were debating it. As you can imagine, there was an agonizing decision for the parents to make. So they decided to seek the guidance of the saintly Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach of blessed memory. So they came, they met with Rabbi Auerbach, explained the situation, and he asked them, tell me, did you discuss this with your son? So they said, discuss it with him. He doesn't exactly have the mental capacity to appreciate the issues at hand of what we're struggling with. So he said, you can't just drop a child off at an institution without discussing it with him first. Why don't you bring him to me? Let me speak to him. So they brought their child to Rabbi Shlomo Zalman, who sat down next to this young man, this young child. And he asked, what's your name? He told him his name. And he said, well, my name is Shlomo Zalman. Do you know who I am? And the boy says, yeah, I do. My parents told me that you are a Gadol Hador. Gadol Hador is a term used to describe the spiritual giants of any given generation. So Rabbi Auerbach smiled. He says, well, that's what they say about me. I don't know how true it is, but that's what they say. But now that you mention it, I have a problem. And maybe you can help me with this. There is a school that I know that needs an extra pair of eyes to make sure that everything there is run properly. And as a Gadol Hador, part of my responsibility is to make sure that all schools in Israel are on the up and up. But I can't be at all schools at all times. So I want to ask you a question. Would you be willing to go live in a particular school and serve as my representative to make sure that everything there is running properly? And you can tell everyone there that you are there working for Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and that he sent you as his emissary to supervise things there. The boy said, I accept the mission. And he joyfully and enthusiastically went to this institution. And in fact, he constantly made himself a presence, telling the teachers what they're doing wrong, telling them what they can do better, telling the caregivers how they can do a better job. If any boy was upset in this particular school, he would comfort them. He would make sure that they were happy. Why? Because he had a mission. His mission was to work for Rabbi Shlomo Zalman and make sure this school was on the up and up. And when they asked him, why do you care so much about every single child? He says, what do you mean? Rabbi Shlomo Zalman sent me here. I have a job to do. How sensitive of Rabbi Auerbach to think of it this way, rather than allow a child to feel like a castaway, like his parents gave him away. He gave him a mission. He gave him a purpose. He didn't have this long speech to inspire him. In fact, the fact that he was chosen as a representative was all the inspiration he needed. God says to Moses, beyond all the laws and the history and the theology and the philosophy of Torah, first and foremost, tell the Israelites that they are to be a mamlechet kohanim v'go kadosh. Keep it short, keep it simple, keep it to the point. 7 words. From now on, you're a people on a mission to be a blessing. And the rest is commentary. But first and foremost, you need to know I am choosing you as my emissaries to be a blessing to the world. Keep it short. Keep it simple. Everything else is commentary on this mission statement. And we have been doing the commentary ever since. We rabbis, we elaborate on these 7 words and we build on it, and we build and we build and we build. Lots of commentary. We talk a lot. A congregant once said that he had a dream that he was at one of my sermons. And then he woke up and he realized that he was. This fellow was walking out in the middle of a talk I was giving, and I said, "Hey, why are you leaving?" He said, "To get a haircut." So I said, "Why didn't you leave before I started? Why didn't you get a haircut before I started speaking?" He said, "I didn't need one then." So we talk a lot, but in this speech, God says to Moses, keep it short, keep it simple. You may remember this, those of you that are political junkies, back in 1992, in the Bill Clinton election year. The campaign strategist, a man by the name of Bill Carville, he hung a sign in the campaign headquarters, and it read, "It's the economy, stupid." The message to all those that were working on the campaign was, don't lose sight of the core issue of this 1992 campaign. Don't get confused, don't get distracted, don't get lost. Keep the message simple. It's about the economy, and that's it. You get asked a question by a reporter, bring it right back to the economy. Don't let them sidetrack you. Keep it focused. We as Jews must not lose focus of what it's all about. It's the mission. We're here on a mission and we can't lose sight. That's who we are. That's why we're here. So what is the mission? What does it mean to be a Jew? Let's summarize it. To be a Jew is to live with the firm conviction that our Creator was kind enough to supply us with a user's manual for how to live a good and happy life. To be a Jew means to love your neighbor, to care about the stranger. It means not to steal, not to lie, not to deceive, not to stand idly by when another is in pain. It means not to worship idols or any other destructive isms, whatever those may be at any given time. It means to maintain high standards of decency, of modesty, of fidelity. It means to believe in God and to observe rituals that connect us to Him, to keep open our lines of communication with Him, and to remind us of His presence at all times. To be a Jew is to have the courage to stand apart, to be in the world, yet not of the world. What do I mean? Not to conform to the world, but to lead the world. It means to not live just in the present, but to remember our past and to build for our future. To be a Jew is to know that life and world history is not one big circle, as in we're born, we die, and the next generation comes along and repeats the process. Like the washing machine, wash, rinse, and repeat. No, to be a Jew means we see life as a spiral. We are here to repair. We're here to elevate. We're here to improve the world, to make sure we leave it better than the way we found it. That we bring it closer to its ultimate state of goodness. That we bring it closer to its ultimate state of harmony and peace. Let me share a story with you. It happened, we mentioned before, the documentary film about Menachem Begin that we're going to be showing in less than 2 weeks. So when Menachem Begin was Prime Minister of Israel, the Jewish state was going through a very difficult time economically. One of the members of the Knesset at the time was a man named Shmuel Tamir. And Shmuel Tamir shared the story I'm going to share with you now. He himself was not personally observant, but yet he had religious ties, and he knew that there was a rabbi that his family was always connected to, a very prominent sage in Jerusalem, Rabbi Aryeh Levin, who's known for his compassion. And he set up a time to meet with Rabbi Levin, and he wanted to enlist his support to get a religious ruling that he felt was important at that particular time in Israel's history. This was his thinking. With Israel's difficult economy, there were many couples who simply couldn't afford to properly care for the needs of a growing family. So he makes this appointment with Rabbi Aryeh Levin to ask that just for this period of time, this difficult economic period of time, if a couple finds themselves in such difficult financial circumstances that they have permission from the rabbinate to terminate pregnancies, that abortion should be allowed and allowed by the rabbis. That was his appeal. That was his meeting. After listening to his request, Rabbi Aryeh Levin was quiet for a moment, and then he responded. And this is what he said. I find it interesting that you have come to me with this question, because I remember years ago, I was faced with a similar predicament to the one you're describing. There was this young couple that came to me. They were students and they were married. They had a child, a little girl, and they just found out that she was pregnant with another child. But their financial situation was desperate, and they saw no way to cope with the cost of another mouth to feed. So they asked me to consider granting them permission to end the life of the fetus. So I explained to them that although I understood with all of my heart that it won't be easy, there were 3 reasons why they should go through with the pregnancy and allow their child to be born. The first was my conviction that God, who gives life, can be trusted to sustain life, and that every child brings new blessings to a family, including renewed blessings of parnasa, of livelihood. So rest assured that your child is God's child as well, and God will stretch forth his hand and see that he or she is well supported. Somehow God will provide. The second reason I gave them was a halachic reason. That halacha, Jewish law, says that a person should strive to have both a boy and a girl to fulfill the mitzvah of be fruitful and multiply. And being that right now they only had one child, that in order to fulfill their complete obligation of be fruitful and multiply, they should continue to try to have children. And being that she was pregnant, that she was still obligated by Jewish law to have this child. But the reason I want to tell you, he says to Minister Tamir, the third reason I gave them is what I want to tell you. And the third reason I told this couple that I cannot in good conscience give such a dispensation, because if you are pregnant, within you there already exists a holy soul with a mission. Like every one of us, that soul has a purpose which the world needs, or else it never would have been created. So please, he said, I told this couple, don't put the brakes on the fulfillment of your child's mission before it even has a chance to begin. And I say this to you for your child's sake and also for the sake of all mankind, because that child needs to be a blessing to all the families on the face of the earth. That's what I told that couple. Minister Tamir realizes that he's not going to get the grant to his request. So as he's going out the door, he says, so did they listen to you? Did the couple you told us to have the child? To which Rabbi Levin said, yeah, they did. They listened and they had a boy. And Minister Tamir says, did that boy fulfill his mission in life? To which Rabbi Levin responded, that's something you're going to have to answer. Because the people who came to me years ago were your parents. And you're standing before me today only because they chose to follow my ruling. So let me ask you now, are you fulfilling your mission? Are you a blessing to others? Are you fulfilling your mission? That's the question. That's the question we each have to ask ourselves. We know what the mission is. We know we were chosen. We know we were chosen, the Yehei Bracha, to bring a blessing to others. Am I fulfilling my mission? Are you fulfilling your mission? God placed us here because our lives matter not just to us, but to the whole world. We are divine messengers on a mission. And that mission can revolve around many things: our families, our loved ones, our friends, our contacts, our careers, our professions, and our God-given talents and abilities, which make us unique and allow us to do the things that no one else could do or would ever do, and without which the world would be so much poorer. Are we fulfilling our mission? Rabbi Beryl Wine is a prolific author, columnist, lecturer, historian. He's written many books and produced hundreds of audio and video recordings of the entire panorama of Jewish history. And someone once asked him this question: what motivated you to devote your life to Jewish education? And he answered as follows: I was born in Chicago. And one day in 1946, my father said to me that we were going to go to greet this great rabbi that was flying into Chicago. We're going to first go to the airport to greet him when he lands, and then we're going to escort him to the synagogue where he's going to give this major address. I asked what his name was, and he said his name was Rabbi Isaac Halevi Herzog, the chief rabbi of Israel. And indeed, we went to the airport, big crowd to greet him, went back to the synagogue, to the big shul, and Rabbi Herzog gave this scholarly lecture, most of which I did not understand. I was a child. But then towards the end of the talk, he says, now I'm here to talk about a matter of grave importance, and I need to bare my soul to all of you. I just returned from Rome, where I went to visit Pope Pius. And I handed the Pope a list of 10,000 names. And I said to the Pope, these are the names of 10,000 Jewish boys and girls. Some of them were kidnapped. Many were willingly given over by their parents to Catholic families for the purpose of saving them from the Nazis, in trust that after the nightmare would be over, the children would be returned. You have these children. We want them back. The war is over. It's been over for more than a year now. I'm here to take these orphan children back with me to Israel so that they may be raised in the homes of their own heritage. This list is a list of our children. These are Jewish children, and you know it. The Pope looked me straight in the eye, and he said, I will not and cannot give you back even one child. We have a rule that if a child is baptized, he could never return back to another religion. And all these children were baptized, and therefore we cannot give them back to you. And I pleaded, and I pleaded, and I begged to return our children to us, but he refused. And then suddenly Rabbi Herzog began to cry. He put his head down on the podium and he wept openly and uncontrollably. Everyone in the synagogue was either silent or began to cry along with him. And then he raised his head again. His eyes were puffy. The tears were still running down his cheeks. His face was still red with emotional intensity that made him look like an angel. He called out to all of us, crying, I cannot do anything for those 10,000 children. We lost so many. We lost so many. So I ask you this. What are you going to do for the next 10,000 Jewish children? And what will you do for the 10,000 children after those? What will you do for the tens of thousands of Jewish children in Chicago or any other city in the United States? I've always been haunted and challenged by the question posed by the chief rabbi. And I just knew, even as a young student, that I would devote my life to perpetuating Jewish education, especially from amongst our youth. Just a PS on Chief Rabbi Herzog. His son became president of Israel years ago, and his grandson was just elected president of Israel a few weeks ago. My friends, it's not just rabbis or teachers or writers who must live with that sense of mission and purpose. Each of us must ask ourselves, what am I doing to help secure the future of the Jewish people? Because we lost so many. How do I help make sure that we don't lose any more? Perhaps I can see to it that my own children, my own grandchildren receive a better, more comprehensive Jewish education so that they can continue to identify themselves Jewishly. Perhaps I can help secure such an education for a child whose parents cannot afford it. Perhaps I can do more to help strengthen the Jewish community and elevate the society around me. We each have to ask ourselves the question, what am I doing to help secure the future of the Jewish people? What actions can I take, not just to reap life's blessings, but to be a blessing to others? That's why we are here. The leading designer, manufacturer, and marketer of licensed children's sports apparel for all of the major sports leagues in North America is a New York-based company called Outer Stuff. And the founder and CEO of Outer Stuff is an observant Jew by the name of Saul Werdiger. One day, out of the blue, Saul Werdiger receives a call from Mr. Oh Jun. He's the South Korean ambassador to the United Nations, asking for a meeting for lunch. Saul had no idea why the ambassador from South Korea would want to meet with him, but he agreed. He gave Mr. Oh Jun the address of a kosher restaurant in Manhattan, and they meet there, they're seated, and Ambassador Jun says, you know, I have always heard negative stereotypes about Jews and about Israel, which I must confess, I tended to take at face value. Then my daughter took a design internship with your company. My daughter works for you as an intern. And throughout the year, she kept telling me how wonderful it was to work for you. In particular, he continued, there were 4 things that stood out that she would always talk about. First of all, she told me how every day at 1:30 p.m., no matter what was going on at the office, all the men, including men from neighboring offices, would retreat into a room to pray the afternoon service. And she was just so wowed by this that these people just stopped their work every single day on clock to pray. It was inspiring for her. Secondly, every Friday, the office would close down early in the afternoon in preparation for the Sabbath and would remain closed all day on Saturdays. And this time off, starting from Friday afternoon, was given to all employees, no matter which faith or religion they belonged to. So my daughter would get off every Friday because of the Sabbath. Thirdly, my daughter observed that the executive offices were constantly visited by a flow of petitioners for charity. People either seeking support for themselves, for their families, for nonprofit organizations, but there was this constant flow of fundraisers, of people coming to ask for funds. And every one of those visitors were received warmly. None were ever turned away. Everyone walked out with a check of some sorts. Most importantly, they were treated with respect. And my daughter observed all of this, the dignity and the respect that in other places they would be called beggars or schnorrers, and here they were treated with a certain dignity. Mr. Jim then produced his checkbook and explained that given her incredible experience and the valuable lessons that she learned while working for Saul's company, he wanted to repay all of his daughter's earnings from the internship, because what she gained spiritually was worth more than anything money can buy. So Mr. Werdiger said, no, put your checkbook away. With all due respect and appreciation for your offer, your daughter worked hard. She earned her salary. She deserves her pay, and I'm not taking any reimbursement from you. Then Ambassador June told Saul Werdiger something quite amazing. He said, you know, I have voting privileges at the UN, and it is because of my renewed appreciation of the Jewish people, thanks to you and your company, that I abstained from voting in resolutions against Israel on a number of occasions, to the dismay of many of my colleagues. And on one of those occasions, I was the deciding vote, and it's because I would not vote against Israel that the resolution failed. Now think about this. No one at our stuff, including Mr. Werdiger, had any idea that this girl that was interning for them was the daughter of an ambassador. No one could have ever imagined that their typical conduct at work would have had such an impact on this girl, and by extension to her father, and by extension to resolutions that were going on in the UN against Israel. They were just doing what they do. That's what God meant when he spoke to Abraham about be a blessing. Be kind to others. Be giving to others. Treat people with respect. The Torah doesn't mean that we should stand up and preach and stand up on a pedestal or a soapbox. The Torah wants us to live exemplary lives as outlined by its teachings, by its role models, and thereby we will be a blessing to the world. Rabbi Shlomo Lawrence was a prominent activist on behalf of religious issues in Israel. He was also a member of the Knesset for 33 years, after which he served then as chairman of the advisory committee of the Bank of Israel. He passed away in 2009, and he once gave a fascinating account of a meeting that he had with President Harry Truman while the former president was living out his retirement in Kansas City, Missouri. President Truman, as we know, was the prime motivator in influencing the nations of the world to recognize the Jewish state of Israel in 1948. And on one of his visits to the United States, Rabbi Lawrence went to see President Truman at his home, Israel, and Truman kept this close relationship throughout Truman's retirement. The president said to him, I'm grateful for this opportunity to explain to you, Rabbi, why I supported and pushed for recognition of the state of Israel. After all, my decision in favor of 650,000 Jews wanting a state of their own, while surrounded by tens of millions of Arabs who were dead set against a Jewish state's emergence, ran counter to America's political interests. For America's political interests, we felt at the time, America felt at the time, that the interests of the tens of the millions of Arabs that had the oil was far more important than some Jews that wanted a state of their own. In fact, opposition in America to this policy of granting Israel a state of its own was so fierce that one of the newspapers in my own city ran a headline, Truman the Traitor, because of my position on Israel. And that was aside for the strong opposition of his own Secretary of State and a number of high officials in the State Department that were dead set against Truman voting in the favor of the establishment of modern state of Israel. So let me explain it to you. As a child, I grew up as the neighbor of several Jewish families whom I greatly respected. Now, on the Sabbath, one of the families would have me come over to be what they called the Shabbos guy, the guy that turned the lights on and off in their home. I knew the laws. I knew when they would hint at something, I knew exactly what it meant I was supposed to do. And I would get paid in challah. That's what Truman said. They would pay me in challah. I loved challah. They would bake this Shabbos challah that was out of this world. And the Shabbos guy would get some of the challah because they would turn the lights on and off. That's where I grew up. I love these people. My father had a custom to read from the Bible every Sunday. And when we read about Cyrus, king of Persia, who granted the Jews permission to return to the land of Judea and rebuild the temple, as a kid, I thought to myself this: one day, when I'm president of the United States, the dream of every young American boy, at least it used to be, I will do what Cyrus did, and I will let the Jews go back home. Go figure that my dream of one day becoming president actually became a reality. When Chaim Weizmann, who later became president of Israel, visited me, and it is known he brought Truman a Torah scroll as a gift, asking me to instruct the American ambassador to the United Nations to support the establishment of the State of Israel, I remembered my childhood dreams. Now, obviously, a sentimental feeling like that on its own would not have outweighed my responsibility to the interests of the United States. Dream or no dream, as president, the interests of my own country must come first. So why then did I nevertheless decide to recognize your state? Truman went then on to speak about the terrible dangers facing the world due to the atomic bomb. As the only world leader to ever authorize the dropping of such a bomb on another country, he took the horror of it very personally and listened to the almost prophetic words of a former American president back in the 1950s, especially in light of what's going on in the world today. The ominous threat of atomic warfare, Truman says to Lawrence, will continue to threaten the world with destruction. It will threaten the world's inhabitants with a fate worse than simple death. And I believe that just as you Jews saved humanity, a species that can often be barbarous, 3,000 years ago with your Torah, today too the Jewish people will rescue the enlightened and heal the cruel hearts of our age and rescue the world from destruction. That's why the American president felt that there had to be a Jewish state, not just for the sake of the Jews, he said, but for the sake of America, for the sake of humanity, for the sake of the world. When Rabbi Lawrence returned home to Israel, he relayed President Truman's words on the floor of the Knesset so that the country's chosen leaders might know what the world expects from the Jewish people. It's remarkable how Israel indeed has played such a central and important role in world affairs, giving its tiny land area, its small population. Israel should be nothing more than a blip on the world's radar. Yet it dominates attention everywhere, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, but it's always in the news. Either way, its impact is completely disproportionate to its size. You look at just about every arena of achievement, from technology to the military, to agriculture, to medicine, this tiny little country is at the forefront, improving the lot of humanity. Remarkable perhaps, but not surprising, because that's the way it's always been. We've always been a tiny people, not because you are the biggest of the nations did God choose you, says the book of Deuteronomy, but because you are the smallest of the nations. What does that mean, because we are the smallest? Exactly, because we are the smallest. You are my living testimony, says God. The very fact that the Jewish people exist as a nation to this day is living proof of God's existence. Because according to the natural laws of history, the Jews should have disappeared a long time ago. Through persecution, through assimilation, for such a tiny nation to not only survive against all odds, but to thrive and to have such a far-reaching impact is nothing short of miraculous, of living proof of God's existence. Israel and the Jewish people represent the triumph of quality over quantity, of soul over body, and of spirit over matter. We'll continue on this theme and then start bringing this into the theme of the Shema Yisrael prayer, the prayer of the faith of the Jew, and then into the second paragraph of the Shema, which talks about the belief in the Torah, the belief in the mitzvahs and the blessings that would come forth from God. I invite you all again to join me next Wednesday. If you'd like to stay on the Zoom format, Wednesday at 12:30. If you're interested in joining live, I'd like you to just send me an email so that I know, I gauge the audience and get a sense of who would like to start coming to in-person classes, same time. It's going to be the same class. We're going to try to do it simultaneously. And then again, remember next Wednesday in the evening, 7:30, we're going to begin the story of Joseph and his brothers. That will be on Zoom. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Look forward to seeing you, whether in person or on Zoom. It should be a wonderful week and a healthy week for all.